Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board regular meeting, and today is September 13th, 2016. The time is 5:05 p.m., and if you would, please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If we could please have a roll call.
Pam Kirby, Kim Hartman,
George Jackson,
Barbara Perleberg,
And Bonnie Sneed. All members are present, and we have a quorum. First item on our agenda is actually approval of the agenda. Board members?
I move to approve the agenda as submitted.
Thank you, Mrs. Kirby.
I will second.
Thank you, Mrs. Perleberg. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. That motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is student and staff recognition and celebration. I'll hand that over to Dr. Birdwell.
Thank you, President Sneed. Governing Board, at this time I'd like Dr. Mitch Von Echten and Danny O'Brien to come up, and they have some students and some staff that they're going to recognize.
Thank you very much, Dr. Birdwell. Madam President, Governing Board, I have a real treat for us tonight. I have with us Olympian Taylor Ruck. If she could please join me at the podium, please. Also, I'd like to invite Chaparral Athletic Director Tommy Eubanks to join us. Chaparral High School junior Taylor Ruck represented the nation of her birth, Canada, in the Olympic Games held last month in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Taylor was part of Canada's bronze medal-winning 4x100 women's freestyle relay team, comprised entirely of first-time Olympians, as well as its 4x200 freestyle relay team, which not only set a Canadian national record with a time of 7:45:39, but also won her teammates and her a second bronze medal, too. Wow, very cool. Taylor may have been born in British Columbia, but we are proud to call her our own. And with that, Mr. Eubanks has a few words to share.
Yes, thank you for having us. I would like to say, on top of all of Taylor's great athletic performances, she was also able to maintain her 4.75 GPA throughout her time as well. So congratulations.
Wow.
Thank you.
Taylor, again, let me just say, I had an opportunity over at Chaparral to meet with her and speak with her. She is one of the most humble athletes I have ever met. You make us so very, very proud. Thank you again for representing us in such an amazing way.
Good evening. I would like to ask Dennis Roller, Director of Facilities, and his staff to please come forward. If you would, come on up. This evening, we're here to acknowledge the staff of Building Services. Hopi Elementary started the school year with brand new fields thanks to the work over the summer by the Facilities Department. Approximately 100 tons of bad, rocky soil and stabilizer were removed on the 2 baseball fields, and 70 tons of new dirt spread. The fields were re-leveled, seeded, and fertilized, and the berms around the fields were raised to accommodate the flood irrigation. On the play fields, the sprinkler system was repaired and the fields were reseeded and fertilized. So thank you very much. I'd like to introduce.
Madam President, Governing Board members, Dr. Birdwell, it gives me great pleasure to be here today to recognize our fellows that put so much work in this summer. First, one of our grounds leads, Mr. Greg Skelton. And another one of our grounds leads, Mr. Joe Arteca. And then the guys that really put in the work, Mr. Robert Beck. Barry Fenstermacher. Dave Lemire. And Chris Russell. Thank you.
Just a sampling of all the great work that we have going on behind the scenes. All summer, they're working like crazy to make sure we're ready for kids, so couldn't say more about that. That's all in the recognition area that we have this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Birdwell. Next item that we have is a public comment. And this is the portion of the Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board meeting when we invite the public to make comments. Although not required to do so, the governing board values the input of the community, so we feel that it is an important part of the communication with our stakeholders. For agenda matters, please indicate your desire to speak and list the item or topic on the white card and submit to Mrs. Como. To my left here, for non-agenda matters, please take note that action taken as a result of this type of public comment will be limited to responding to any criticism made by those who have addressed the governing board, or directing staff to look into the matter, or asking that the matter be put on a future agenda. This is pursuant to ARS 38-431.01G, and no other discussion or legal action is allowed. Please keep in mind, public comments represent personal view of the speaker and may contain incomplete or inaccurate information. If the item is an agenda item, we encourage audience members to stay and listen to the discussion pertaining to that agenda item to gain a more full understanding. Please approach the microphone when your name is called. There is a 3-minute speaking limit, and Vice President Perleberg will assist you with the timing on that. And in all cases, public comment is subject to reasonable subject matter, place, and manner, and please word your comments so that they are not defamatory or disrespectful in nature. The first one that we have is students, Sarah Dorsch and Jordan Blue. They're from the Student Advisory Board. Okay, by my count, we're missing somebody.
Hi, Mia Rubio.
Hi, how are you?
Good evening, Dr. Birdwell and members of the Governing Board. My name is Sarah Dorsch, and I'm the president of the SUSD Student Advisory Board. I have been a member of SAB since I was an incoming sophomore, and have been able to observe and participate in a wonderful and diverse group of students, all who are driven, well-balanced, and practical. I am proud to say that this board includes members from all complexes in the district, and therefore is able to offer you thorough student perspective on district issues. As a group, we meet monthly and have worked with various district administration members covering security, technology, curriculum, and current issues within the district. While many of us cannot yet vote, we see that it is important for high school students to have a clear understanding of the political issues and forces affecting SUSD. We will be voters soon, and therefore it is important to have an understanding of our issues that affect students, administration, and communities alike. With that being said, I am going to pass the mic to my Vice President, Mia Rubio.
Hi, my name is Mia Rubio, and I'm a junior at Arcadia and also the Vice President of the Student Advisory Board. I'd just like to take the opportunity to invite the board to call on the Student Advisory Board for student input. Thank you. I'm Jordan Blue. I'm a senior at Desert Mountain High School and also the Secretary of Student Advisory Board. And I just want to repeat what Mia said. Please come to us, members of the public, students, members of the governing board, with any questions or concerns you have about what's happening on our campuses and off of our campuses as it relates to your students. And with that being said, I think that Student Advisory Board just serves as an excellent example to the public to not dehumanize education policy and to remember that there's actual students, not numbers. So, thank you.
And the last card that I have this evening is Nancy Cantor.
I'm here to speak on behalf of several people who can't be here. but everybody has the same message. We understand everything that the district has done since last spring to bring Tonalea K through 8 online. Not just online. Its presence is being felt throughout that neighborhood and throughout the parent community, and nobody could be happier than me. I'm thrilled to death. You are doing magnificently well with this. We want to remind you now that these are tough times. We've got a lot to make up for in that complex with our schools. We can do it, but communications need to improve, whether it's with parents, whether it's with the surrounding neighborhood, and trust me, you have a very vocal surrounding neighborhood here, but whether it's with them or whether it's with the faculty and the staff, everybody needs to be on board and understand why we did what we did at Tonalea K through 8, why we need to continue doing it, and where we need to take it. It's not just boom and it's done, even though that seems to be what staff did in getting that school up and running. It's amazing, truly amazing. And if you think that field was something, guys, this is beyond belief. At least for me as a mom who was a PTA president there, I know how difficult that is over the summer. It's boom, boom, boom. The other thing I have to say is, please, we like what we're seeing. Kids are liking what they're seeing. And for kids who have, by a large portion of the community, considered that's not worth the effort. We can see it, and we're going to keep helping too. Don't forget to call on us.
And next is superintendent comments. Dr. Birdwell again.
President Student Governing Board Community, first let me have Kyle Ross stand and acknowledge that he is the advisor of the student group that you just heard from and puts in many hours after work to advise them. So thank you, Kyle. Now to our 3 young ladies that were brave enough to come and speak, are you joined by any of the other fellow student group? Could you all please stand and be acknowledged today? So I want to just take a moment on my comments to say thank you for your voice. Your voice does not go unheard, and I do look forward to getting out and meeting with you, and Mr. Ross shares some of your comments. We do have some particular topics we're going to bring to you this year, and I look forward to hearing your responses on those. So again, thank you, students, for that dedication. Now, I also just want to send out some special thank yous to the Scottsdale Unified School District Foundation for the gala that we had last week. Again, honoring the quest for the best and being able to continue to raise dollars to support our students, our teachers through the mini grants, and continue to support the school district. We were able to acknowledge 2 former alumni, Charles Keating IV and Heather Morris, both representing us in an absolutely wonderful manner. And again, their lives continue to inspire us, and we appreciate that. We also were able to acknowledge some students and staff as well, and anytime that we can do that, we take opportunity to. So again, what a wonderful evening. We also have fall sports in full session, but just to draw attention briefly to the middle school fall sports, 800 students this past Saturday were engaged in some type of baseball or volleyball at Cocopa Middle School, Chaparral, Saguaro High School, and that's in full swing. And then today, and you got to see some pictures up here earlier, today we had a special event here at Coronado High School for our young ladies from Coronado, where they had an opportunity to be part of a workshop with the AAUW League of Women Voters. But really what it was about was having an opportunity for our students to understand leadership opportunities, volunteerism in the future, but more important than anything else is to get engaged. It certainly is a great foundation. We look forward to making that an even better event as we go forward, running and winning, and it was a nonpartisan event. But again, identifying opportunities for leadership, that it doesn't matter how small you might feel your voice is, that your voice counts, and our student leaders here tonight understand that. Your voice does count. Moving on, bond and override community information meetings are beginning to start, so on our website these will be posted. But we're kicking that off on Tuesday, September 27th at Coronado High School, and then they're going on through October 5th at Desert Mountain High School. They are information fact-finding only, as that is our role as a governing body in a school district. So Danny O'Brien will be leading that up, and I will be with him at those meetings and hopefully answer any question that the community might have. Trip Reduction Program competition finalist. We're really happy to say that Scottsdale Unified School District has 3 schools, Co-Chiefs, Desert Canyon Elementary School, and Arcadia High School, have been named finalists in the Maricopa County Trip Reduction Program's Most Creative Bulletin Board competition. So, appreciate that. Online voting ended recently, and appreciate all of those who have participated. The Shanghai Foundation Arizona State First Robotics Championship. Arcadia High School will host a day-long competition October 15th, so mark your calendars. The top 30 Arizona high school robotics teams will be competing. Students have 6 weeks to design, build, test, troubleshoot, and ship their robots to Arcadia for the event. This year's competition, First Stronghold, uses a castle themed game played by 2 alliances of 3 robots each. Now, I am not sure what that totally means, but it sounds exciting. I know I look forward to spending some time there on that day. Bottom line is, if you haven't seen robotics competition in Scottsdale, get engaged, because we've got some great teams out there. And then finally, mark your calendar for the showcase coming up October 22nd at 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Kokopah Middle School. And the Scottsdale School District will be showcasing many of our schools. And hopefully we have all 30 schools that will be participating. And everything from student performances to art galleries. And yes, we'll even have a little food there to keep you there. So hopefully you can come to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Birdwell. The first item, oops. Okay, sorry about that. First item that we have for information discussion this evening. What did I? Consent? Okay, skip right over the consent agenda. So the next item is the consent agenda. Does anyone have a motion or anything that they'd like to discuss?
I move to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Consent agenda was passed 5-0. And so the next item is item 8A, information discussion item, academic data trends update, continued.
President Snead and Governing Board, it's my honor at this time to have Dr. McCauley and Carl Ross back to talk data with you. This is their favorite topic. We're learning to love it as much as they love it. Tonight is focused on the ACT and what does it mean to our district. So, I won't ruin Anna's opening. I'll just stop right there, Dr. McCauley.
Good evening, Madam President, Governing Board members, Dr. Birdwell, Sandra, and all those who are with us tonight. Thank you for not ruining my opening. I wouldn't have known what to say. No. So tonight we are going to talk about the ACT test. And the ACT, for those of you who are unaware, is a college entrance assessment used to determine readiness for post-secondary studies. The ACT has now become the most administered college entrance exam in the nation. So this is due in large part to some state or philanthropic initiatives. So some states actually have adopted the ACT as their high school exit exam. We have AZ Merit right now. Other states adopted ACT. Helios in Arizona is a foundation that has sponsored administering to an entire district, high school juniors, the ACT test, and they pay 70% of that fee. So districts that are in that program, they started with 10, I think they're up to 15 at this point, increased the numbers testing in Arizona. Now, why is that important? Well, for the first time, ACT actually saw a dip in scores in 2016 attributed to more students actually taking the test. And so here is percent tested, and I included the national, state, district, and then each of our high schools percent tested on ACT from 2012 cohort to the 2016 cohort. And you can see the nation grew by 5%, and then the state went up 2%, But we had two of our high schools really take a jump. We had Saguaro increase by 5%, and then Desert Mountain by 11. So we increased those numbers. And so the unfortunate thing, again, is that nationally, those scores drop. So remember that when we go through our data. So here's our percentages, and then I also included the end count so you could see what that actually looks like. Okay, so now ACT has benchmark scores for each subject area that they have done a lot of research over many decades to equate these with college readiness. And so, for example, in English, that cut score is an 18. In math and reading, it's 22, and in science, it is a 24. So here we have English across the years at each high school. The orange line represents the state's percent of students meeting those college and career-ready benchmarks I spoke about. And then the gray line above it is the national trend. And then our bars are our schools. So remember when I was telling you most nationally that with the increase of students testing, we saw a decrease in the actual scores. And remember I talked about Desert Mountain and Saguaro both increasing their number of testers. And look, they actually went up. They defied the norm. So let's give them a hand in English. We're really proud. So you can see these are really high numbers, well above the national and state average. And we, of course, we know the state average is lower than the national average. It typically is across NAEP, ACT, SAT. So the bar is not necessarily the state for us. It's beyond that. So that's why I included the national as well. But even with the national trends, we still see how much higher our kids, how many more of our kids are actually meeting those benchmarks and demonstrating they're ready to go straight into a four-year university. So again, we saw growth in almost every year at every school in those percentages. Reading, I want to draw your attention again, both those schools. We can save the applause and just know that this is going to be the general trend for them. Okay? So here we go again. Now, in reading is not the typical reading most people think about on the ACT. It's actually reading in the social sciences. It's heavily weighted in that area, whereas the English is more your literature and your grammar and that. So that's the distinction between English and reading. Just this is where they're learning how to read their social studies content. Math, again, we'll look at our two schools that grew, define the trend still. And notice that our math is higher than reading. I'm going to go back. So do you see our kids are meeting, more of our kids are meeting in math than in that reading. So we know we need to shore up, and this is a trend that you see nationally as well, where the reading isn't as high as the English, but it's not always lower than the math. So that is a trend that I'm seeing here in Scottsdale that I don't typically see. And then science. Science has been problematic nationally. The amount of students drops considerably when we get to science, meeting those benchmark scores. It's not a Scottsdale issue. It's not an Arizona issue. It is a national issue. And the science test is heavy on reading. And so there's a lot of reading, but it's the reading in the sciences. So it's not necessarily testing between, do you know the difference between osmosis or not osmosis, but I was thinking of the genetic thing, but I'm drawing a blank. Doesn't even matter, you get the point. But it's more, can they read about science and then answer critical questions and derive the answers after they've read it, during their reading. So we've known this for a while, that this needs to get built up. And this is, again, not a Scottsdale issue. This is national. Now, we are going to move on to assessment, if you have no questions on ACT.
I want to go back to the first slide for a second, if you would, Dr. McCauley.
Okay. Is there a fast way to get back?
Arrow, the arrow key moves quicker.
Oh,
There you go.
Thank
See,
you.
isn't that neat? Arrow forward or back?
I never knew that.
It's all right. So I wanted to just note something. In 2016, when we talk about 229 of the graduates from Chaparral took this test, that's 50%. And it's important to go back and note that. How many of the senior class took the ACT? This is an area that Dr. McCauley and I have been familiar with as we've been studying and working with the Helios Foundation for multiple years on Arizona's trends with ACTs. The ACT test was the test that many states debated on whether or not this should be your AZ merit. This should be substituted in place of it, because it is a nationally norm trending, so you can actually see how you do, and you can compare from state to state, city to city, school to school across our nation. But more important than anything else, it's the predictor to college success. So it is a very good testing for us to look at. However, I want to point out that not every senior takes this test, or not every junior takes this test. And that's a really important point, because if you're only getting 50% of your kids tested, we're only truly looking at 50% of the kids that are saying right now, I know I'm going to college, therefore I'm taking this placement. And what we want to do is make sure that we look at encouraging more to take this. Some districts have committed and said that they will pay for the exam in order to have this data on a larger scale to say, well, how are all of the students college and career prepared, and where do they fall within the nation? So something for the governing board to think about as we go forward. This is just the ACT. Now, some students opt to take the SAT, and we'll bring that back to you at another time. So that's not to say that only 50% of the graduates at Chaparral went to college, because that's not true at all. We know that over 90% of the graduates are going to college. But they may have chosen to take an SAT, a slightly different style of test. And like I said, Dr. McCauley is going to bring that back to us at another time. But this is a very good examination to consider, how am I doing on a national standard? And are our students ready for college? So our goals out of this should say, we want to increase the number of students that are taking the exam. And really encourage students to take this, and make sure that we're offering scholarships to take the exam, that it's not a financial decision for a student, that we're willing to say this is such an important examination for a student to get into college that we're willing to help financially or come up with scholarships. So an issue for us to focus on. I do believe there are students who choose not to take this exam because it is a financial issue to them. So we want to address those as we go forward. Now, I'm sorry, Dr. McCauley, we can skip. So I asked her team, okay, so what's next? As you begin to look at this national trend, you look at AZ merit, how are you going to help predict where we're going? And so that came to us a conversation about School City, and how School City can help us with these predictions, both college and career ready for ACTs, as well as looking at our own AZ merit. So I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, and I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Ross.
You want to I apologize, I want to ask questions about what we just looked at.
Okay. And I apologize that I didn't see who lit up first. Ms. Hartman?
Thank you, Dr. McCauley. It's great. There, that's better. So on the slide we were just looking at, that's where I had a question too. So that 58%, where did I see
That's
that?
58% of the cohort of 2016. So 58% of the kids that graduated in 2016 took the ACT at some point during their high school career.
Okay, so that 50%, for example, in Chaparral, compares to the Arizona average of 58% of total students. Is that right? Okay, so we are in our SUSD average is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, 50%, something like that.
And
Okay.
if you go back here, so you look at Arizona's 35% way back here. This was before more districts were doing the district choice in Arizona. And so that's why it goes from 35 to 58 as more districts started, as Helios opened that up and added more districts, more kids started taking it as well.
Okay. So then my question was going to be, okay, so 41% of our SUSD seniors, or at some point in their high school careers, they could have taken as a junior,
Yes.
a senior, okay, have taken it. If we
So I don't know how you would answer, maybe, I'm not sure how to answer this question, because this could be juniors or seniors taking it.
Well, I did it by cohort, so I looked at if they were in the cohort 2016, which would have been a senior last year, did they take it at any point during their high school career, then, and you go with their max. You
Okay.
take their max score. That's,
Okay, so my question is, let's just assume it's 11, so the passing rate of language arts, reading, math is somewhere based on the subject, somewhere between 70 and 90% based on that, okay. How does that compare to the passing rate, either exceeding, how does that compare to AZ Merit for, say, 11th graders in our district?
so that, I can run that, but again, we're only going to get it on kids who actually took this test, so it's going to skew the data upward. We're going to have a negative skew. It sounds like it should be positive, but when you're toward the higher end of the spectrum, it's a negative skew, so we would not be able to see really how it compares, because we're only looking at kids taking those two, this one here, that are college bound.
Okay. So my question, I was just trying to understand so I could ask the question. So I know there is a national trend to actually require, encourage, pay or enable students to take the ACT. Do we believe that is of benefit? Clearly, students that are college bound are taking the ACT, particularly if it's universities that prefer ACT over SAT. But does it make sense for us to set as a goal to increase numbers taking ACT, or do we, how do we
Okay,
know?
so now we're going to get into philosophy, because we know if we increase, we know we're going to go down, and that's okay. Philosophically, we're all aligned, saying every child should have equal opportunity to know what their readiness is, and that this test does provide that. Often what you find is a lot of kids who never thought they were smart will rise to the top on ACT scores, and you'll bring them in and say, why haven't you taken AP? Well, I didn't know. I had no idea I had this aptitude. And that happens quite a bit, and unless they're getting tested on those skills at that level and being ranked nationally, then they don't know. And so now we've just opened up, it's more equity, and we've opened up opportunities for kids who might not have had them otherwise. Plus, we get a great inventory, interest inventory out of it, where the kids get to even find out, based on how they respond, what careers might be a good fit for them because of the way they responded to that. And then they'll even tell them, based on how you scored in this area, which falls within this work wheel, this world of work wheel, here's how you rank compared to other kids who indicate they're going in that direction. And so it gives the child a lot of power over their own future. They get to now say, hey, I know a little bit about myself I didn't know before. And it opens up career exploration, and it opens up post-secondary exploration as well.
So if I might add, Governing Board, really critical early on to give every student the PSAT, and the PSAT helps us counsel students into advanced placement. And my experience in multiple districts is that once we start using that instrument through a counseling process, that you identify students who didn't think they could challenge themselves, and we begin to open up the doors of opportunity for students who have typically maybe not had that dream in front of them. So from my perspective, on a philosophical level, I am a firm believer that these types of national tests, the PSAT, the SAT, or the ACT, are critical in the conversations with children. They're also critical in the conversations with teachers to be able to share with them how our students are doing on a national level and whether they're college ready. And that's a critical high school instrument for our conversations with our high school folks. You can still pull out these kids, this group that have already, man, they're just gung-ho, they know they're headed to college, if you want to look at various variables. However, I want to know this on every student, because I think we have a whole lot of students who aren't necessarily being identified, and those dreams aren't necessarily being built by the counselors because they just simply don't know what they don't know. So I'd encourage us to consider a model that allows every student to take an ACT.
Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you, Dr. McCauley. So I appreciate you recognizing the accomplishments of Saguaro High School and Desert Mountain, because it is counterintuitive. You have more students take the tests, you would assume the scores might dip. But in the case of those two schools, it went the other direction. Do you have any insight with those two schools? I hate to put you on the spot, or if they have representatives here, as to what drove that surprisingly positive result?
I would love to hear from the representatives on that, because that was a trend that defied the national norm.
Yeah, so I don't, Ann or Nikki, feel free to come up to the mic if there's something you'd like to add. We're putting you on the spot, so,
And I'm
so
Yep.
if you felt like there was some initiative that you did at the school that assisted with that, please share.
Thank you. There was. We made it an initiative last year and this year to promote this test and to make sure that we started at Sabre Days, which is when our students register, to start promoting this and getting the information in the hands of parents. That's what we really did. So promoted the test, made awareness about it.
Communication with parents, so the importance of the test.
Yep.
Thanks. Nikki, okay. This is why I love having principals here.
Me too. I would say I'm seeing a trend in just the last couple of years, interestingly, with kids choosing the ACT over the SAT. We're seeing a shift there. Not as purposeful as what Saguaro was doing, which was very targeted. And I'm not sure if that's coming from sort of this national movement, or if there's just kind of a shift in the student choice there. But we are having kids less frequently take SAT and choosing ACT.
Interesting.
And I would say that that's both a national trend and a college trend. So when we look at the universities are really promoting the ACT examination as well. So I think that was a very astute comment on the principal. So both principals, thank you very much.
And it really was. And on the SAT redesigned their entire test 2 years ago to make it look more Common Core-like and more ACT-like, because so many states were going with ACT or ACT Aspire, which is the ACT from 10th grade down to 3rd. And so I don't know if that's part of what happened, but I know there were some bumps in the road for SAT early on when they were having, because you lose all your research when you go to an entirely new instrument, and that's what they did. So I don't know if that may have weighed into it, but just know SAT looks very different than it did when you and I took it.
Thank you.
Great. Kyle, why don't you talk to us a little bit about next?
Thank you, Dr. Birdwell. Madam President, members of the board, always a pleasure to come and speak with you. You may remember in March that we came to you and asked you to award a contract to a company called School City to become our new instructional improvement and assessment tool. And I just wanted to give you a check-in to let you know where we are, how things are going, where we are at in the process. So a couple of notes just on that phrase, instructional improvement and assessment tool. And for any members of the public who are hearing about School City for the first time, we don't want to think about this as just an assessment tool, just as a tool that we use to give tests, because it's so much more than that, and that is what the RFP committee was looking for, was really an instructional improvement tool. And that being a tool that we could use to inform instructional decision-making for teachers. But in addition to a tool that would help teachers make informed instructional decisions, the committee was looking for a tool that would really help students be empowered to take a role in their own learning, something that would allow them to ask themselves, where is it that I need to be going, where am I now, and what do I need to do to close that gap? So a 12-member committee over the course of last spring met and reviewed the proposals that came in. And ultimately, they chose School City. Really, the number one reason was because of ease of use. They found it to be very intuitive, new for sure, different clicks in different places from what they're used to with any previous tool they might have used, but very quick to pick up, very easy to use, something that would be easy for the students to use as well. One of the other key selling points is that School City offers students and staff instant access to results and instant access to assessment data. So what I mean by this is if we use School City to give a computer-based assessment, which can very much mirror the type of modern era assessments that we see, such as AZ Merit, a computer-based assessment, students can see those results immediately. And not just how I did on the test. It's not just this is how many I got right, but students and staff can immediately see not just which questions they got right or wrong, but why they got those questions right or wrong, what standards were assessed, what standards did I struggle with on this assessment, if there was a standard that was assessed 3 times, did I miss all 3 of those questions? Or did I miss just one of them? And is it maybe the type of question that I struggle with? So it allows us to give various types of assessment items. Traditionally, we all grew up taking tests that maybe had a multiple choice 4 answers, and our students for years are used to taking tests where there was a multiple choice with 4 answers. In the modern age, there are all types of assessment types. Choose from a list, highlight the text that we're asking about, choose more than one answer. Okay, so our students with School City can get the practice on this type of assessment item to better prepare them for tests like the ACT and AZ Merit. And again, it gives them that instant access so they can see, is it the standard that I'm struggling with? Is it the item type that I'm struggling with? Is it the format? Is it the tool? It gives us more data to, again, it all comes back to informing instructional decisions. With School City, we got access to a large, robust item bank that covers ELA and math. It's an item bank that many assessment vendors use. The item bank is called Inspect. And these are all items that are already aligned not only to the Common Core state standards, but more importantly to Arizona's standards for ELA and math. So with access to this item bank, we can create our own classroom level or district level assessments that we know are already aligned to state standards and are going to give our students good practice for future assessments. But in addition to that item bank that we get with the product, we also have the ability to take our own Scottsdale created assessment items that our teachers have been working hard on for the last several years, several hundred items in all of the subjects, and upload them into School City so that we could take assessments that we have previously created and turn them into computer-based next generation assessments. We can take those assessment items that might have been a more traditional for answer item and convert them into technology-enhanced items. Teachers also have the ability to create their own item banks. So if I'm a classroom teacher and I've already taken the time to write a bunch of good tests that I've aligned to standards, I can put those into School City as well and transform what I used to give as a traditional paper-based test that I had to grade and then correlate to the standards. I can turn that into a computer-based test or a bubble sheet test that I can scan right in my classroom on my document camera, and again, saves me time with the grading and saves me time with the analysis, figuring out how my kids performed on the standards. Another thing that we liked about School City is that although they're not a new assessment company, they're not new to the game, they've been around since about 1999, they are relatively new to Arizona. But if you look at the list of school districts that are on the slide here, in addition to Scottsdale, we have Mesa, Tucson, Paradise Valley, and Deer Valley have also joined us in adopting School City. And we actually have a Arizona Users Conference next week where all of these school districts will be getting together and planning how we can all work together to make School City that great tool to inform instruction. So just a brief look at the timeline. This takes us just quickly through last year and to where we are now in September. So on the left, you see the process that we went through in January of hearing the presentations from various vendors. On March 22nd, you as the governing board awarded the contract to School City. And then in April, we started with our first round of training. So in April, this was all-day training that was provided to district-level users. So these would be the people who would be using School City on the back end to create a test, to create the assessments from the curriculum department, the folks from IT who would be making sure that School City would be running, and anybody who would be on the district level. And then in May, over 3 days, we brought in site-level leaders and provided all-day training for them. That was really an overview of everything that School City could do. So this included site-level coaches, campus test coordinators, in some cases teacher leaders, reading specialists, and that list actually goes on with many other different job types that didn't all fit on the slide. But we asked schools to bring your test coordinator plus one, and then when we had more space, some schools were able to bring 3-4 people so we can get some site-level leaders on the ground first. Then as we moved into the summer, we began the implementation process. That was primarily the IT department, the curriculum department, and the testing and assessment department. And we worked pretty much all day, every day with the implementation team at School City in everything from uploading all of our item banks, getting our pre-tests and benchmarks created, to making sure that all of the filters and the district settings are correct, and making sure that everything is whitelisted so that nothing will be blocked inadvertently by the network, and just making sure that everything worked. In June, as you may remember, we always have the Summer PD Institute. It's a voluntary PD Institute that teachers can come and get some professional development in the summer. We offered 2 sessions, 2 half-day sessions for early adopters. Anybody who wanted to come in and get an early look at School City and get access to a sandbox environment. So it was a fake school, fake students, fake assessment data, but they could get that practice over the summer, and it was well attended for both sessions. In July then, at our annual July Administrator Academy, we had a presentation to principals, updating them on the timeline and the process and the training opportunities that were coming. On August 3rd through 5th, all teachers were treated to a video narrated by me that they, of course, loved. And this was an overview, a training overview, basic navigation within School City. And again, remember, the key selling point was ease of use, but they are new clicks in new places, and it does take a little bit of practice just to find out where everything is. So this video was an overview of basic navigation and how to find assessment result history for the students. So if I'm a teacher, I have a number of new students that are coming in. I want to be able to see the hand that I've been dealt. I want to know who my kids are that are coming to me. They were able to log into School City and find 2 years worth of assessment data for ACT, SAT, benchmarks, AZ Merit, AIM Science going back 2 years. Most recently, on our August 31st early release day, it wasn't a School City focused district early release, but instead administrators and teachers were able to sit and have conversations around assessment literacy. In other words, what does it mean, this world of assessment, and how are we using the different assessment types on campus? So although that wasn't a School City specific training day, it was a valuable part of the bigger picture of having an assessment literate Scottsdale. And then for the last 2 weeks, we have had the instructional technology coaches have been visiting every campus and training teachers on how to use School City to create their own classroom level assessments. So that brings us up to where we are as of today. And then finally, I just want to talk about a few next steps. So within School City, we are able to administer this year Scottsdale created benchmark assessments for ELA and math in grades 1 through 11. So they are School City, they created the benchmarks for us from that item bank off of testing blueprints that we gave them that we felt would hopefully mirror the type of thing they would see on AZ Merit. And then we have gone through the process. Once they created the benchmarks for us, we are now reviewing their benchmarks and giving our approval on them. So they are School City created, Scottsdale edited and approved benchmark tests. The big thing that we'd like to accomplish is to get more teachers and more PLCs creating common formative assessments. So just a quick nomenclature check. A common formative assessment is where we have a group of teachers, and we can call it a PLC or a team or a grade level, and we say, we all are responsible
for teaching the same standards. We all need to teach the kids the same standards. Let's all give them the same assessment. So let's agree on what our target is, and let's agree on how we are going to check to see if the students have met that target or not. The benefit of this is that if we are assessing them the same way, we can get together and say, well, my kids really struggled with this standard. Boy, mine did too. Okay, let's talk about this. Was it the standard that they're struggling with? What was the item type? Was it a technology-enhanced item? Was that the trouble? What if one teacher's students did really well on a certain standard and another's did not? If my kids didn't do as well as yours did, I want to know what you did to teach that standard, because that's going to inform my own instructional decisions. So common formative assessments, we don't have to give all of our assessments this way, but they are a nice check along the way so we can all make sure that our kids are meeting the targets that we've set for them. So the key words in there are common and formative. Common means that they are created collaboratively, and formative means that they are checking assessment for learning, not assessment of learning. Assessment of learning comes after the teaching's done. That's AZ Merit, that's an end of chapter test. A formative assessment doesn't have to have a grade. It doesn't have to go in the grade book. It doesn't have to be reported to parents. But it should be a conversation between teacher and student so we know where we are along the way. This is to inform our teaching. So that's going to be a big focus for us this year, is how do we create good common formative assessments. The next bullet point is a long-term goal. This is certainly something we've already begun working on, and we want to focus more attention on this, and that is creating common end-of-course assessments at various grade levels. So that is a coming soon and something that we're working on, but that is something that we're excited about. So finally, we have training and professional development that is going to be ongoing throughout the year. We know that our teachers are at various levels of use and that we can't force somebody into a certain level of use until they're ready for that level of use. So we are offering it in various formats, various styles, on everything from assessment creation, that's just the beginning, but really the assessment literacy that I mentioned earlier. So assessment literacy, to be assessment literate, a teacher would need to know how to create or select classroom level assessments and use the results to inform their teaching. And we need to be able to interpret the results of external assessments. So things like AZ Merit, things like ACT and SAT, interpret those results so that we can make good decisions. What you've seen in the last couple of presentations from Dr. McCauley and myself is more of a focus in Scottsdale than we've had in the last couple of years on this aspect, on the interpretation of those external test results. So we will be providing ongoing training and professional development in this area, in the using the data, but in also creating assessments, whether formative or summative, that get us there. So it's not just enough to say we're going to go in School City and we're going to create some assessments and they're going to be aligned to standards. We also need to make sure that they're good assessments and make sure that they are assessing what they think that we are assessing. So it's an exciting time to work in assessment, if it's possible to say such a thing. But we have a lot of things going on, a lot of change, and you know, like I said, it's all just different clicks in different places, so we're working our way through them. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about School City.
Mrs. Perleberg, you didn't. You were first, too.
It worked. Okay. Now, can I turn it off? That's good. Okay. Thank you both very much. I think it is an exciting time, and we have already in the past kind of highlighted the significant culture change that we're all experiencing and our sites are experiencing at various levels. So I'll try and make it brief. One of the questions, speaking of highlighting that instructional improvement focus, how are you really communicating that to our teachers, to our staff, kind of early on? I don't know if that was earlier in August, but is really giving them a sense that this just isn't just another assessment tool, but something different, a different way to look at it. I'm just wondering what ways you've been able to highlight it throughout our teacher community?
Thank you, Board Member Perlberg. I appreciate the question. I'll give you an example. When we look at our most recent test for our pretest, for example, regardless of grade level, regardless of the assessment, whether it was ELA or math, we can look at the item analysis and see which questions the students missed. So, for example, I can tell you that at every grade level, our students struggled with multiple response items. This is a question where it asks them to choose 2 from a list. The interesting thing is they're not choosing the wrong 2. They're choosing 1, they're choosing 3 or 4. And I can see how much time that they've spent, so they're not clicking through. They're not spending 10 seconds on this, they're spending 3 minutes. So that should be informing what's happening in the classroom. Because if we are not teaching them to look at a question and see what it's asking for, then they're not going to perform well on it. Another example of how we can inform our instruction and change what we're doing, and this is something that some of our campuses are going to be beginning very soon, is to look at something that the state calls performance level descriptors. So if we look at one of the state standards, let's say it's a reading for information standard, and the standard, just to simplify it, says that the student will find the main idea from a text. We might look and say, well, I'm doing that. My students are finding the main idea from text. I'm giving them assessments, and I'm saying, what's the main idea, and there it is. Well, if we look at what the state says about finding the main idea in text, they actually break it down into 4 areas. And they break it down into minimally proficient, partially proficient, proficient, and highly proficient. So I can look at that and say, well, in order to perform at a highly proficient level on a test like AZ Merit, it's not just finding the main idea. Yes, the standard is finding the main idea, but it's finding the main idea while doing all of these other things. It's finding the idea from multiple sources. It's finding the idea and then making my own inferences about that. So the instructional decision to be made here is, am I teaching my kids to do highly proficient things every day? Because if we're not doing highly proficient things in the classroom, we're not going to be highly proficient on an assessment. So we are not there yet in terms of training all of our teachers on how to use School City to do that, but that is a goal that's on the front burner for me.
Right.
And it's definitely where we want to get to this not just being an assessment tool, but being an instructional improvement tool.
Well, I want to add to that.
ahead.
With those PLDs, they're written in the verbiage that you would put on your board as an objective, your daily objective, define, interpret, all of those things. And what you find is if kids are scoring partially proficient, it's because they're only being asked to identify something, when to be highly proficient, they need to identify and evaluate something. And so all that, those terms are, I mean, just writing your lesson objective using the highly proficient side will help move you that way. Now, we know early on you might have to start with minimally proficient because these are new concepts, but that shouldn't always be the objective, hitting that target, sorry.
And when we look in the item bank to create an assessment, so the first round of training that teachers are getting right now on assessment creation is just learning the clicks. It's just learning this is how you create an assessment within School City. We have to get through that before we can come through and say, now you know where the clicks are. Now let's talk about how to create a good assessment. So part of that is searching through the item bank and filtering it in such a way that we can make a test that has various types, various difficulty questions on there, so that we are, assessing them in different ways.
Well, and thank you for kind of clarifying that next step that we're going to have to make, and teachers will have to make. Already had feedback from some teachers hoping that next step will indeed, be there. And I guess that is kind of part of my question, is that next step where you're really digging into this tool, is it going to fall on our principals, teacher leaders? Where is that training going to fall down the road, and time carved out for those teachers and those either principal site leaders, whoever is kind of given that task of helping someone read it through? are certain teachers going to say, hey, I love this stuff, I'm going to be a lead on this? I'm just kind of wondering for our teachers, so they can even understand what's that long-term picture where it's like this thing's really going to be meaningful for you.
And the answer is yes.
All right.
So all of those things. We have a meeting next Wednesday with some campus representatives. So we're going to start building capacity at the campus level to have some experts on campus who are going to be kind of the go-to person. But we will be offering district level trainings, we'll be offering site level trainings, we'll be offering one-to-one sessions. Again, we have people at various levels of use. Is Josh here? Is my friend Josh? No? You know my friend Josh Pantier. He was making assessments in School City without any instruction before the first day of school. So we have everything from that to some other folks who are nervous and want somebody to be there with them as they start to do it. So as I said, yes, we're going to do all those things because everybody's going to require a different type of training.
Well, you're both right. It's very exciting. So thank you very much.
Mrs. Hartman.
Thank you. So first of all, Dr. Ross and Dr. McCauley, thank you for making this, sharing your passion with the district and our students and teachers. So this is outstanding. And thank you for walking us through it. I mean, I feel like I talk about summative and formative on a regular basis in different contexts that you're just helping us learn as well. So, and I appreciate that. I also realize this is kind of a walk before you run. We're moving in direction where we want to go. So I just have two questions kind of related to kind of where we want to go. And the first one is, so do you have a sense of a best practice? I mean, maybe Josh is a good example, but a best practice of the frequency of what a formative, well-used tool, what that looks like. And the reason why I'm asking is because something just sticks in my mind. There was, I think it was this summer, maybe last spring, they had the Rodell Teacher of the Years interviewed, and one of them really talked about formative testing and said, his best practice is 11 times, whatever that number is. But do we have a feel for what that best practice, what we're kind of shooting for, what that looks like, or is it very customized?
It's chunking, it's scaffolding. So you wouldn't want to roll through an entire semester before you assess kids because now you've got this cumulative assessment and you don't even know what the gaps are. So they're going to have some pacing and chunking. You don't want to over test kids either. So if you're making them sit down for a 35 question assessment every week, they're going to get test fatigue, and by the time they have to take the test for college entrance or for the state requirement, they're going to be exhausted. So there's pacing, there's chunking, and there's scaffolding. So you're going to want to teach, assess, but you can do it in smaller amounts than waiting until the end of the quarter or until a progress period. This is them just taking the pulse as they're going along.
And for all of my Scottsdale teacher colleagues who might be listening, I hope you're not using School City to assess every day. Formative assessments should be happening every day, but formative assessment can be nothing more than watching the room and seeing the looks on the faces. It can be checklists. It can be, viewing student performance. It doesn't have to be administered as a School City assessment. School City is just one tool that can help facilitate that process.
Okay, right. And I mean, there's apps on a phone that you can download, do a quick check-in,
You bet.
and just,
Absolutely.
get a pulse of a class or a student. My second question is really one about culture, because this is a cultural shift, and so particularly the formative piece of it in terms of, it's more a spirit of continuous improvement, and kind of in the business world innovation, they call it kind of fail forward or fail early and often, I mean, in a really positive celebratory kind of way. So do students and teachers just get that, or is that something that we mindfully try to communicate as well?
Board Member Hartman, that's a great question. don't know, that's one that I'm prepared to answer with any expertise tonight. It's going to vary by teacher. You know, as I said, whether we're talking about School City or Google or some other, you know, whatever new innovation that comes along, we're going to have our innovators and early adopters who are going to say, oh yeah, I'm going to give it a try. I don't care, you know, if I fail trying, I'm going to give it a shot. We have others that are early adopters, early majority, late majority, and then we have some at the end of the S-curve, and I won't use the technical term there, but there are some that will never want to give something a try, and that's just within an S-curve of innovation. That's where the population is going to break down. So all of our teachers fall somewhere on that spectrum, and our goal is to move along and to start recognizing what the next group needs to get them on board.
And can I ask one follow-up question on that? So I'm just going to ask it slightly different, but the same concept. So from just the student's perspective or the teacher's perspective, in terms of it's okay if I don't perform well or my students don't perform well, because it's informing me both about the participant as well as me as the teacher. So that's what I mean about the culture, a culture from both the student and a teacher perspective, that it's okay not to get good results. It's about the journey and the incremental improvement over time.
And thank you for rephrasing it. I think I understand your question a little bit better. I hope so. That is the whole idea behind formative assessment. You know, with summative, it's too late. You've either done you've learned what you were supposed to do, or you didn't. And now the test is done and we're moving on to something else. Formative is where you should have those good failures. Formative assessment should be where you're saying, boy, I didn't get that right, but I want to. So let's fix it and then assess again. So formative assessment should be an environment of positive failures.
So Governing Board and Petitioning Member Hartman, I would say that the training, and I attended the training at Chaparral High School, thank you very much. They did a great job. But it really was heavily focused on the difference between assessing of learning versus assessing for learning. And that for learning is about, we're looking for the gaps. We're looking for kids where kids didn't get it, because it gives me an opportunity to reteach. And so learning that difference between the two, and it was very interesting as I looked at the surveys of the group that I was with, and one of the check for understanding moments was to be able to, where are you in your learning curve with the assessing of learning and for learning, and most of those were left blank, because it was a new terminology. But at the end of that training, I think any teacher could have gone through and marked that. Now, that was the group I was with. So, you know, interesting enough is that I think because it's a little bit different terminology with a heavy focus on that formative piece, but I can tell you that you can go across this district and teachers are using formative assessment. Sometimes it's just catching the new term that's being used versus and understanding what I'm already doing that's best practices. So in that regard, I don't think that's a heavy shift in the culture. And I hope that our teachers know that this is about them, to help them be better at their craft and be reflective on the craft. So I think it's a great move, and commend both Kyle and Dr. Ross and Dr. McCauley for their work. I should probably stop calling you Kyle. Dr. Ross.
It's my name. That's okay.
Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you. I have two questions. One is more technical, and the other one gets back again to the culture. On the technical side, it's probably easier to answer. How much history were we able to load in to School City in year one, and what kind of history?
On
the student history.
The student history, we loaded 2 years, but we still have within our own data warehouse, we have multiple years, but within School City we loaded 2 years worth.
So if I'm a parent of a 7th grade student, my student's math teacher has his 5th grade and 6th grade benchmark testing.
That's correct.
At his or her fingertips.
That's correct.
Okay, wow, that's powerful stuff. Okay, that's good. So the cultural question that I was going to ask, it gets to that. So, you know, no secret, I've not been a big fan of standardized testing. This is replacing Galileo. So if you could answer this question to both pretend I'm a teacher and then pretend I'm a parent. What's different? What makes School City not just another tool to replace Galileo? Because as we know, Galileo was received lukewarm, maybe at best, over the years. So help me understand why this is any different.
Thank you for the question, Board Member Kirby. I think what struck the RFP committee as they were evaluating their proposals, again, was the ease of use. Some of our teachers found our previous product to be a little cumbersome to navigate, and that was certainly so for the students as well. So if we have our adults having trouble navigating around, imagine our first and second graders will too. So that was what struck them right away. They received access to a demo sandbox version for evaluation, and they were able to get in and start creating assessments as well as start pulling up test history without any training at all, just by reading the titles on the boxes. So I think that is the biggest thing that we gained, was ease of use, but also ease of navigation. It's very clearly laid out when you want to go in and look at a student's or a class's, a school's results for a test. It's very easy to know to see what you're doing without having to have a cheat sheet, without having to have a step-by-step to find what you're looking for. Whereas in not just our previous product, but in many other products, it's more difficult to navigate.
I want to add to that. Really, aside from the ease of use, the only other difference is the culture, the philosophy. Before it was used, from what I'm understanding, as the autopsy rather than for formative use. This is the teachers and kids data formative assessment. Okay, the summative is for us to improve the school at the school level and the district level. Formative is to improve at the student level, and that's for those teachers. And I know it's not perfect, and I know people feel like they're being judged by their formative data. We try very hard not to communicate that that's happening, because it isn't from our stand. Our stand is, hey, what's going on with this standard? Because every fifth grade missed it big time. Now the district curriculum team, it's like, oh, we must have something wrong here, or getting in with the instructor. Maybe we're not teaching it right, and everybody's not teaching it right, and that happens. So it's going to be the culture around assessment will be probably the most stark difference that you'll see, or the starkest difference.
And anecdotally, from teachers and administrators that I had heard from who were not fans of the previous tool, there's excitement for the new tool. So I don't know that we would have been able to drum up that excitement had we not gone with this. Thank you.
And I remember, and I want to give kudos to Josh, even though he's not here. He was an early adopter with the last one, too. I remember a presentation that he made showing how he used, he did do benchmark assessments, and he did a presentation showing how he used it in very much the similar way from what we saw at our study session. And so it kind of brought back a little bit of deja vu that, and it also brought back deja vu in that when I first taught computers, I taught DOS. And I liken it to, one of the signs of technology is ease of use. I mean, when we think back to how many people became adopters because of Windows and because of clicking, and because of Mac being more intuitive, those are things that just happen normally when you receive input from users on how to make it easier. And so I think this is a normal progression, and it's nice that that we're embracing it. One of the things that you said to me was that the students can use it too, and I understand how they could use it if there's an area where they need to refocus to move forward. How do they use it to be empowered if they've already mastered the standards? I mean, I'm real-time, day basis, I'm a student, I'm looking, I'm meeting all of the standards here. How do they really become empowered?
Well, President Sneed, that's might be one of the better questions of the evening, because it's one of the big four questions when we look at what do we want our students to know, how are we going to know if they know it, what do we do if they don't, and what do we do if they already do? So when the student, specific to School City, students can log in and they can see their own progress on any assessment that they've taken. But there's also a great feature in there called feedback cards. So any assessment that a teacher gives, he or she can print out a feedback card and give it to the student, and it tells them specifically how they're doing on the standards. So if they could track their own progress that way. In terms of how they are empowered, it's in taking that information and seeing, again, going back to where do I need to be, where am I now, and how do I close that gap? If I've already closed that gap, then I want to know what's beyond it. What's beyond that gap? What's the next gap for me to try and close? So now this is a good conversation between students and teachers, students and tutors, students and parents about what can I do to extend my learning. But without knowing where I stand right now, without knowing that I've already closed that gap, I don't know to ask that question.
Okay.
So it's having access to that information.
Thank you, and I have to say, I can't go any further. The slide that Dr. Benson showed us that had how do we know what they know? What do we do if they don't understand it? I'm just going to say I had deja vu because I've heard probably every other year a different administrator present that same slide. Nothing against you, Dr. Benson, that you use it, that it's the same thing. The concept hasn't changed. Again, it's the understanding of why it works and the understanding from every stakeholder on why this philosophy works. And so as more and more people are getting behind it and more stakeholders are embracing it, we're much more likely to be successful. So I just wanted to say, for those of you who have sat through the same presentation for years and years and years, we know it's just another step in the progress and making things and keeping things fitted together, keeping the pieces of the puzzle that are really important still up front, and that is important. So thank you.
And you raised an important point about what about the kids who are already there, and you just gave me an idea. We need to have some additional little checks for them that are enrichment level, higher level, getting there. So.
Yeah, and President Sneed, Governing Board, that's part of the conversations going forward that we're going to have with the curriculum folks, because they really do begin to answer that piece.
Yep. That's a very tough question. Thank you. Thank you so much. The next item on our agenda is also an information discussion item, item 8B, first best practices.
So we welcome Dr. Benson and Dr. Nance to a discussion that we've really said in the Scottsdale district, what will make the difference is looking at first best practice.
Here we go. Good evening, Madam President, Governing Board members, Dr. Birdwell, Sandra, and all here with us this evening. As we continue our data conversations, Dr. Birdwell has emphasized the value and importance of developing a shared understanding with all stakeholders for the areas or the key areas of focus for quality instruction and instructional improvement. So based on your invitation, we're happy to come back to you after our work study presentation on Thursday and share that information in this setting with more stakeholders. Before we do that, I'm going to ask us to identify who all those stakeholders are. If you are a teacher, will you please raise your hand? Lots of teachers, yay. If you are a principal, please raise your hand. Parents, students, community members, district employees, Did I get you all? So we have a host of stakeholders. Most of the district employees got to join us at the work studies, but not so much the others as they are teaching and learning at that time. So we're going to repeat and discuss the 4 areas that we've been having conversations about that impact instructional improvement. Specifically tonight, we're going to revisit the importance of and define first best instruction. We're going to clarify what we mean by rigor and raising rigor. We're going to explain the 4 most important questions known to increase learning with respect to the work and conversation of collaborative teams and PLCs. And then we'll share the purpose of and key look-fors when we're talking about, maybe we should pull up our PowerPoint, when we're talking about walkthroughs. Is this us? Here we go. With that, one of the observations Dr. Birdwell has shared in previous settings is that SUSD is intervention rich in some places, meaning sometimes we have lots of persons, classified or certified, providing those interventions, and sometimes we have extra programs. Nationally, we know that to be true, especially in schools that might be identified as struggling. So while high-quality interventions are essential, first best instruction is also essential. So what do we mean by first best instruction? Typically in ed speak, we often refer to first best instruction as impacting tier 1, all kiddos. And while generally, there's a whole host of things that we can see in first best instruction, generally we see 5 key areas present in high impact classrooms where first best instruction is going on. First, it's pretty obvious to tell what the learning objective is. And you heard Dr. Anna and Dr. Kyle talk about the objective being listed on the board. And while that's one way to have evidence of what the objective might be, the best way to check on if the learning target is clear is to ask a kiddo what they're learning. Can they articulate what it is that they're learning? And in classrooms where we've got high quality best first instruction going on, they do. Do we see high levels of engagement? Have our rockstar teachers structured classrooms to ensure all kids are expected to have opportunities to respond and expected to participate? Do we see the students talking and doing predominantly in the classroom? Do we see evidence of deeper learning, higher order questioning, higher depth of knowledge being exposed to our kiddos? Do we see frequent checks for understanding? As you heard Dr. Anna and Dr. Kyle talk about formative and summative assessments. And they were quick to clarify that frequent checks for understanding can happen all the time in observations, in progress checklists, just thumbs up, thumbs down, talk to a partner, how are we doing, who understands, and in exit cards at the end of the class period versus waiting for a common formative assessment. And we see all that happening in first best instruction in a positive, safe classroom culture developed and fostered by our classroom teachers. So first best instruction happening with all kids, tier 1 kids in the classroom. That's what we mean when we talk about. Before I click to rigor, I'm going to invite everybody in the room to think about how they would define rigor. There's no wrong answer. I'm not going to run around and take a mic, but how would you define rigor? The only thing we know for sure is that everybody defines rigor differently. Some people believe rigor is about the level of coursework, honors or AP or IB level coursework. Some persons, are, educators or otherwise, situate rigor as the amount of homework outside of the classroom expected of a kiddo. Some persons equate rigor to the quality of work that's coming home. But for our purposes, none of those are wrong. For our purposes, we're going to go refer to Blackburn, who's done an awful lot of work on rigor over the past decade. Rigor is creating an environment in which all kids are expected to learn at high levels. They are provided supports so they can do so, and they are expected to demonstrate learning at high levels on challenging and various assessments. Lots of different ways we can see rigor exercised in the classroom, but when we see it get done in our classrooms, teachers are raising the level of content. They're working with kids to increase the complexity of text and doing close reads of those texts. So kids are marking up the text, annotating the text. We've got that happening behind me, that teachers are actually looking at that as we speak during this meeting. Asking kids to make meaning and make frequent references with the text. Where we see rigor, we also see teachers providing appropriate supports. So those students that might be struggling or below grade level are also given opportunities and exposed to grade level and beyond materials. We see teachers opening the focus, posing questions to kids in ways that invite them to respond, using accountable talk so they know how to enter into conversations with their other students. We see projects, and we see choice. And we see teachers raising expectations by teaching a challenging curriculum and using high-quality instructional strategies throughout the classroom. So those are the two. Dr. Nance is going to take over and talk about PLCs and what we look for when we're talking about classroom walkthroughs.
Good evening. We talk about professional learning communities quite often, and we want to make sure everyone understands what we mean so that we're on the same page. A professional learning community is when a group of teachers has the opportunity to get together and talk about their students and the progress their students are making. It may be a department of math teachers talking about common instruction in math. It may be a group of second grade teachers talking about common instruction in second grade. Or it may be a group of teachers that all teach the same students in a variety of subject areas, getting together and talking about progress their students are making. You're going to see professional learning communities, or PLCs, happening across our district at all of our schools. It really depends upon the school culture and climate as to when those meetings occur, but we do believe it's essential that they do occur. It's important to teachers to get together and talk about how do we improve learning, and you've heard several people talk about different ways of doing that this evening. The research and effective practice across this nation has come up with 4 basic questions that we encourage teachers to ask each time they're together in a professional learning community. First question, what do we want our students to know? That's coming to a consensus on the common objectives, the Arizona standards, what it is we're teaching, what it is we want our students to know as a result of the instruction. Secondly, how will we know if our students have learned it? Dr. McCauley, Dr. Ross talked about one way, and that's using School City. They talked about very frequent checks for understanding that teachers make throughout the day, every day in their classroom. There are different ways to find out if our students have learned the material, but it's important that our teachers talk about that and talk about how we do that. 2 very important questions. What do we do if students did not learn it? Where do we go from there? The interventions, the extra help, the reteaching that may need to take place. And then finally, what do we do if they already know it? Well, what do we do when we find out our students have already mastered what we're teaching? It's time to move on. It's time to accelerate. It's time to jump ahead and move on to the next topic. Those are the 4 basic questions that we're asking every PLC to consider when they get together. A professional learning community is not a grade level meeting. It's not time to discuss the field trip. It's not time to get into other areas of discussion. That's for a different time and place. This is very specific. It's talking about instruction. It's talking about student progress. And then finally, I just want to touch briefly on classroom walkthroughs. Dr. Benson was just up here talking about first best instruction. And what you saw in her definition of first best instruction is pretty close to what we're looking for in classroom walkthroughs. Classroom walkthroughs are your 3 to 5 minutes stopping by a classroom, by an administrator, by teachers visiting each other, by folks like me and Dr. Benson and those of us that are going out and walking classrooms with principals. We look for evidence of planning in that classroom. We look for the objective being taught, and I have to tell you that I believe in almost every classroom I've been in this year in this district, the objective is clear up on the board or somewhere on the wall in the classroom. We're looking for student engagement, the participation of the students. That's probably the number 1 thing we've been looking for so far this school year. How involved are our students in the instruction? Dr. Benson mentioned the level of rigor, the questioning that's taking place. Is it at a high level? The checking for understanding, there's your formative assessment that takes place every day, throughout the day. And finally, the learning environment. Is it safe? Is it conducive to learning? Is it a place where students enjoy being? Those things can be observed very briefly during a classroom walkthrough. It's very difficult to spend a lot of time concentrating on all 6 of those. I can tell you that the student engagement and the checking for understanding are 2 that we're really highlighting this year, and working with our principals and our teacher leaders across the board. Those are some things we'll continue to focus on through professional development, through different activities taking place with our teachers throughout the year. But that's the basics of classroom walkthroughs in our district. Dr. Benson and I have tried to just highlight 4 different areas of instructional improvement and things we're looking for across our district that we're working with our professional developers to work with teachers as we move through the year, and something we will continue to come back and have discussions with you. So we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. I know we had this discussion last week, but if there's anything else, we'd be happy to answer.
Mrs. Kirby. Thank you, Dr. Nance. And you shared this at our work study on Thursday, but I just ask you to repeat yourself tonight because I think it's important to know what that, after the classroom walkthrough, what that feedback loop is, and how it happens back to the teacher.
Sure, and I can't tell you what every principal does in their buildings when they do this. I can tell you what we've been doing as we have teams of administrators working with our Coronado Complex schools the past few weeks, and we continue to do so. We do the walkthroughs for about an hour where we hit as many classrooms as we can during that time with the principal, and in some cases with the assistant principal, who's ever available to walk with us. And then we sit down with that school leader and have a conversation about some of the things we've seen, the excitement going on, the strengths, the curriculum being taught, the programs being used, the resources being used. And then it's really up to that school leader to have whatever conversation they feel they need to have, either individually with teachers, with the staff as a whole, celebrating some great things they have seen throughout their walkthroughs. Certainly, we anticipate that the time those principals are walking with us is not the only time that they're doing classroom walkthroughs throughout their schools, and so that should be an ongoing process.
And if I might add, Governing Board, we've used the term that it should be a positive feedback. So we want to make sure that we are praising the things that are being done well, and then it might be something that's a polish, something I can work on, because teachers also seek feedback to continue to improve this profession. But it shouldn't be heavily trotted in, this, and this needs to be corrected. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the positive nuggets, passing it on, and then, hey, you might want to consider this, and if you want to talk about a certain strategy, stop in, and I would love to visit with you about it. So it really is intended to be a positive process. That's how we're training folks to do walkthroughs.
Mrs. Hartman.
Thank you. Dr. Nance, thank you once again. It's kind of nice to hear this the second time because you just absorb it in a different way. And I just really want to acknowledge, I guess, the positive side of continuing to grow as a district and as a community and a body of teachers and a body of students. So, I don't know, I was just thinking about when Dr. Benson asked the question on how do you define rigor? For me, it's create the conditions for success. Now, we may measure it and assess it and do all those things, but how do we create the conditions for success for our teachers, our administrators, and our students at the end of the day? So I really I feel like this is doing that. And then secondly, your comment on focusing on all of these, and over time, I think each one of them deserves its deep dive, if you will. But I really like the student engagement piece because, and I'm wondering if there's a way to ultimately, you sense it anecdotally, so that maybe that's just good enough. But I do know in organizations the difference between good and great organizations around employment and retention, and I think this applies to students as well, is in satisfaction, really that delta that gets you to that nth percent, that top quartile, even top 10%, is engagement. That's the word that they really look for. It's not about satisfaction, it's about engagement. And engagement really means, how am I connected? How do you see that? So I don't know how to, if there's an opportunity to measure that, and maybe anecdotally is good enough. But I think that's worth figuring out if there is a way to capture that over time somehow, because I'm sure we're moving the needle, and I guess we'll see it in the results, but.
Thank you. Board Member Hartman, I believe we're going to see that in academic achievement over time. I believe you're going to see it in student behavior. The more students are engaged and involved in what they're doing and what they're learning, the fewer problems you're going to have in class. So they may be anecdotal ways to do it. There are also ways that you can measure it moving forward. There are also tools out there that we can use, and I know Dr. Birdwell is visiting with us a little bit about finding a tool where we actually can collect some data as we do classroom walkthroughs. And again, it's just that, it's data. It's counting instances of whatever you're looking for, but it's another way of doing it. And so I don't think there's one way, but all of those ways combined is going to help us determine whether or not our level of engagement is going up. And I just have to say, all of these things, as we do walkthroughs and have discussions with principals and teachers, help drive our professional development throughout the year as well. And in the conversations that we're having with the folks that lead our professional development will be around, what are we seeing? What do we need to continue to work on? What do we need to celebrate? And it's going to help that as well.
Yeah, Governing Board and Member Hartman, just to reiterate, the academic learning team gets back together every couple weeks and discuss some of the things that they've seen, but they also discuss where we've fallen short. So you talk about that monitor, and Julie brought to our point that although we thought we were communicating, for instance, the positives, that unfortunately at one school a laundry list got sent out. Well, that's overwhelming to a teacher. So, oops, that's a fail forward moment. Let's do it differently as we go forward. Let's monitor, let's adjust, let's recommunicate. So that is going on all the time as well. So we want to get better at that. There are wonderful instruments out there for collecting, or software systems basically, for collecting data to look for trends and patterns that a principal then can begin to look at professional development out of. So if engagement isn't happening as frequently as I'd like to see it, then I can then get back with my teachers and say, look, our engagement levels are lower. What are we as a faculty going to do, and how can I support you in making sure that our students are engaged? So it does create that dialogue in-house. And as we met with Pima yesterday, we said, and we hope you will tell us what you need, because we're here to support you. We want to support you as a school. So as the school identifies that need, our job at the district level is to come in and support where they identify they need that support at. And it will look different on every campus.
Mr. Jackson?
Dr. Nance and Dr. McCauley and Kyle, these are, it's nice to be talking about student achievement and instructional improvement. I think that's the best part of what we're doing here. And so it's exciting as a board, frankly, to be talking about these things. And this is all incredibly exciting work that's going on right now. And I just want to reiterate, I mentioned this briefly the other day at the work study meeting, but we're talking a lot about culture change and all, frankly, wonderful stuff. But I just want to reiterate, I know we have a lot of principals in the room, that we're moving, things are changing. And there's a lot more data being used now, and with School City. And it's all, frankly, I think going to be a really positive move for our district going forward. It's just going to, I wanted to reiterate that there's always been dedicated, talented teaching going on, wonderful things going on in this district. And somehow we need to move forward with teachers and embrace these this new culture, which is a very positive thing, without in any way marginalizing the good work that's been going on all the time in this district. Not an easy thing to do, Dr. Birdwell. And I just needed to say that again. There's always been dedicated, passionate teaching going on here, always, of course. But the culture's changing, and it's going to be, we're going forward with this new data-driven culture, and I think that is a very positive thing for our district. I just needed to reiterate again about just somehow through this, make sure that we don't marginalize or discount all the fine work and the dedication all these teachers have been doing all along here at Scottsdale Schools. Anyway, that's all. Thank you.
Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you. Dr. Birdwell just made some comments that I just wanted to acknowledge and thank you and the team, the whole team, that as the walkthroughs are happening and as we're assessing, and the administrative team here at the district level is getting feedback from the campuses on what support they need, and that support may look different at every campus. And that is a huge win, and I want to thank you for being open to that. And some of that will require investment, I'm sure, and so that laundry list, whatever that looks like, I hope will come to us as we go into budget season later on in the school year. But we are a very large district, and no doubt we're diverse, and our needs of our students are very, very different across our district. So I appreciate that.
And if I'm just a final comment to the governing board, this type of work is not done without wonderfully dedicated teachers. And spent last Friday walking Coronado High School, saw some terrific teachers doing a great job, and very much appreciated that opportunity. Spent some time with the Hohokam teachers, and what a great, I don't know where their leader is, but what a great yes, thank you. What a great faculty and opportunity to talk with their staff, and then yesterday at Pima. But so as we're going around and having those meetings, to both Mr. Jackson and to Ms. Kirby, it reiterates over and over the wonderfully dedicated people that we have in our schools. Sometimes we use a term in our field, we say go slow to go quick sometimes, and the key is that you move a little bit forward, and then sometimes you got to pull back a little bit, and you have to check that temperature on every single campus. And quite honestly, as a principal, they do it in every single department. Because every department is at a different place. So I said that we can't do it without wonderfully dedicated teachers, but let me now say that we cannot do the great work that needs to be done in Scottsdale without these wonderful leaders embracing instruction and students at the center of all that we do. So our principals are also doing a tremendous job of refocusing their energy, and I want to thank them for that dedication as well. Across the board, every campus I've been to, excitement, dedication, truly caring about the students in their schools. So along with dedicated teachers, we've got some administrators working real hard right now. So thank you for that. And they're here. So thank you, principals.
Mrs. Perleberg.
Thank you. I'm going to try and make this brief because, again, thank you for restating all the exciting things that our teachers and site leaders are talking about on our campuses. I think it's terrific, and I want to leave tonight because, yes, this is kind of a continuation of our work-study conversation, and I'm hoping that the conversations of this board tonight throughout the evening can in some way provide our community with the idea of where we're trying to go, I think, as a district. Because yes, we have always recognized how wonderful our district is. We wouldn't be here if we didn't. Our passion for it is obviously clear. Everyone in this room clearly has a great deal of passion, and all the educators that I think we've all met and dealt with on our journeys through SUSD have made us passionate as well. So that can never be forgotten, but as it is very clear, and I'm hoping tonight it's been highlighted and understood that our board understands the culture change, the different direction that our district is headed. We know it's scary, but we're also as excited as our educators seem to be in the feedback that we're getting. But we know there's going to be bumps and there's going to be hiccups on every level, at every level, and in every place. And I'm just hoping that our conversations tonight show that our board is working as a team through this direction and through this process. We know our sites will as well with our administration, and I'm just kind of hoping it's building confidence in that, yeah, nobody's out to hurt anyone. We are all here together to help SUSD be successful. So thank you all.
Thanks. We'll let it go at that. And I'd also I would like to thank our administrators. There's a Zen saying that's also used in martial arts that when the learner is ready, the teacher will appear. And so I wanted to thank you for taking the time and the energy necessary to prepare people to be successful before just asking them to change the culture. The preparation sometimes to a big change is just as important as the change itself. And I thank everyone for their participation in that process. The next item on our agenda is the future items. Board members may propose topics for future consideration. Mrs. Hartman.
Thank you. I'm going to propose something, and then you can tell me if it makes sense to do it. And I think this is more of a work study versus, well, it could be actually a general meeting, but I'm wondering if we could have an agenda item to talk about future agendas. And what I mean by that is what I received from Sandra was great, which is a format of what our September through June meetings look like, both work study as well as general meetings. But I feel like I need to have some content in there. So these are the 6 things or whatever they are. I think we know what they are, and I'm wondering if we can talk about that as a group so that we start to plan out the entire year, because there's so many amazing things that are happening. It just would be nice to know that there's a pace that we're going to cover these following topics. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Is that reasonable? Okay.
Yes. Okay, and just for the record, at our study session, several items were brought up for potential items for future consideration. Our dates of upcoming meetings, Thursday, October 6th at 3 o'clock, we're having a study session. That would be at the Mojave District Annex. And Tuesday, October 18th at 5 o'clock, a regular governing board meeting here. And board members, I know that there was a tentative topics schedule sent out today. So if there are items that you would like to see in there, please let Dr. Birdwell or myself know. And also, Dr. Birdwell and I talked a little bit today about the November 17th board retreat will be changed to a study session, so that we can have 2 work meetings that month to talk about some of the future items that we had on here.
We'll schedule the work study with the new governing board.
The retreat.
The retreat.
Yeah.
Guess
With
we
the
call
new
it a
governing
retreat.
board. So at this time, are there any governing board reports? Ms. Hartman?
Let's see, since the last last board meeting, we actually did have the Bus Community Partnership Business Education Breakfast, and just wanted to thank all of you that attended. There were over 200 business and community members attending, and there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scene to pull those off, and so I just want to acknowledge the bus executive director, Julie Brissell, and the board, and all those folks that helped make that happen. And then also wanted to acknowledge Dr. Birdwell and Dr. Gaylor, Dr. Birdwell's counterpart at Scottsdale Community College, really setting the tone of what CTE, career technical education, and business experience looks like. I think it resonated really well with the community, and appreciate that. And then I also like to share one other little thing that is bubbling up, and really thank Dr. Benson for this. Over the summer, I had the opportunity to connect the Arizona State University Director of Information Sciences Systems with our district, actually with Dr. Birdwell, Dr. Benson, and Dr. Von Echten. And they have a really great, interesting program there, which is coding for middle school kids. And they do great work with Title I districts, Title I schools, and it's still forming, but we're working through a program, I know Dr. Benson is right now, to get a very nice number of kids from our district to participate in this coding opportunity at Arizona State. So it's exciting. Thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
I'll be brief. I also think the whole board was at the bus community breakfast, and I didn't want to just dovetail on Board Member Hartman's comments. It was outstanding. The bus initiative is about a year old, and we're making great progress engaging the business community, forming partnerships. I don't think in my time on the board we've ever been we've ever worked as closely with the community college, the city of Scottsdale, the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, we're all forming a very nice partnership with these other community groups to promote education in Scottsdale. So that it's a really exciting initiative that's about, again, it's just starting our second year, and excited to see where it's going to go. And I just had to give one shout out to, again, the foundation, our SUSD Foundation Board, for an outstanding event Saturday night. We were all there, of course, and it was the best one I've been to. Really just a great evening. So those folks deserve a lot of accolades. So thank you.
And I'd also like to thank Dr. Tarkington, Mrs. Tarkington. She said, no, Mrs. Miss, okay. For hosting this morning the Running and Winning with League of Women Voters and the American Association of University Women, and exposing our high school students to women in leadership. And Mrs. Kirby, Mrs. Perleberg, and I were fortunate to attend, and it was delightful to talk to your students this morning. I will say that one of them said, what's the best part of what you do? And I told him it was this. It was talking to students, seeing students. And I told them if I ever turn into a crotchety old lady, I'm going to make sure that I go to high school and elementary school concerts so that I remember that there's hope out there with our kids. Thank you. So at this time, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Thank you, everybody.